In the spirit of making smaller side videos, I'm going to give my 2 cents on some recent game announcements. I've always been afraid of making spontaneous, knee-jerk reaction type videos like this, as I fear they won't age well, won't be the quality of videos I want to make, but I also feel like giving my thoughts on newer subjects, so I'm using this video to test the waters. Anyway, those announcements are Resident Evil 4 Remake, which got announced at Sony's State of Play the other day, and The Last of Us Remake, which got announced the other day at the time of writing. Now, big game announcements like this always get people talking, but I never feel the need to throw my hat in the ring on pre-release topics, instead just waiting for the thing to come out and play it and then give my thoughts. It's why you haven't heard me talk about Sonic Frontiers, which we've seen a bunch of footage of for this month. It looks utterly abysmal if you wanted my thoughts on that. Looking forward to ripping it to pieces when it comes out. But in this case, we got remakes of 2 of my favorite games of all time, Resident Evil 4 and The Last of Us, 2 of the most influential games of the century. Obviously, these projects have me very interested, to say the least.
Oh god!
Oh god!
It can't be! It can't be!
When RE4 Make, that's Resident Evil 4 Remake for short, got announced, the biggest discussion surrounding it was the title of the video. When do games just not need to be remade? When is a game just good enough as is? The discussion had me thinking quite a lot, but with The Last of Us making that discourse even more prominent, that's when I figured it was worth making a video on these games. Today I'm going to give my thoughts on what we saw and discuss 2 things. 1, do games deserve remakes more than others, and what even is a video game remake? Sounds obvious when you hear it, but it gets more complicated when you think about it. But let's start with RE4. I'm really excited for this game. Like I said before, the original RE4 is one of the best games I've ever played, so seeing a new take on it is really exciting. What stood out to me about the trailer the most is this line from Leon.
If I could just forget what happened that night. The pain. Even for a second. This time, it can be different.
RE4 was set 6 years after Leon's debut in RE2. Leon in the original RE2 is basically a different character from the one we meet in RE4. He narrates his backstory at the beginning of the game and speaks about his time as a member of the Raccoon City Police Department in a pretty frank fashion. However, this one line from the RE4 Make trailer has me intrigued because it seems like the writers are trying to continue Leon's story from RE2 Make. I praise the writing of the Resi 2 and 3 remakes for making the characters more relatable and interesting, at least to me. And so Resi 4 is seemingly doing the same thing by establishing that Leon has some lingering trauma from what happened to him in Raccoon City, and who could blame him? On his first day as a police officer, he was hit with the zombie apocalypse where he watched innocent people turn into monsters or seemingly die like Ada. RE2 Make established Leon having the simple motivation of wanting to help people. That's why he joined the force, so being one of the few people who survived Raccoon City's destruction would weigh pretty heavily on him. Even with all the training he's gone through between RE2 and RE4, he's still going to have some doubts and recurring memories of Raccoon City on this new mission to rescue the president's daughter. It feels like a logical continuation of Leon's character in RE2 Remake, and I hope they do more with it. On that same note, I hope we get more content from Ada and Wesker in the remake. Ada's perspective of RE4 was a new mode added in the PS2 version of RE4, and expanding that and to include more content would be great, since her and Wesker's plot is what connects RE4 to the larger series, since otherwise it's pretty self-contained. I also hope they give Leon a reaction to Ada's return. In canon, it's just a thing that Leon already knew Ada survived RE2 by the time of RE4, which I think is a weak writing decision. I'm hoping the remake maximizes the drama there. From a gameplay perspective, I don't have much to worry about. Resident Evil in the last 5 years has been, I'd argue, the most consistently great AAA game series on the market. Resident Evil 7 was a good time, Resident Evil 2 Remake was one of my favorite games of all time, Resi 8 was also great. The only miss there was the remake of Resident Evil 3, but like I said in my last video covering the subject, the game is okay at worst. A miss I'm definitely allowing the team some leeway on. I have a hard time believing that the game wasn't rushed, and if it was, I still think the end product is good, if bland and a lame remake. So when I see the name Resident Evil, I know they're probably going to produce an excellent game, and it's therefore an instant buy. But then, that brings up the conversation that is central to this little discussion. If Resident Evil 4 from 2005 is one of the best games ever made, why remake it at all? Do certain games just not need a remake? I think this question is pretty philosophical in nature, as what does and does not deserve a remake isn't something you can logically quantify. Since I think RE4 is an all-time great, why am I excited for RE4 Make? Well, it's simple. First, there's the fact that RE is just a name worth being excited for. They've proven that over the last several years. Next, when the game design is so great like it has been in these games, the nostalgia of seeing an iconic old game done over in terms of visuals, story, and gameplay just works on me. I love nostalgia when the underlying product we're getting is still top tier. It's why Sonic Generations is one of my favorites in the series, and a game like Sonic 4 is absolutely one of my least favorites. That's basically it. And I get it, if you're in the camp that believes RE4 is plenty good enough on its own merits, what I just said really won't convince you, as they aren't super strong arguments on their own. In fact, on the flip side, I've seen a lot of really good arguments from people who feel like this game doesn't have a reason to exist. Such as, sure, the game will be good, but in that case, they are better served making RE9 instead of an RE4 make because it won't have an original to be compared to. Good point, but the way I see it, it's still really exciting to see how they're going to adapt this classic game in the modern RE style. Leaks have been saying that RE4 Make is going in a more horror-focused direction compared to the original RE4, which took the series away from that aspect and moved towards high-octane action. Seeing RE4's concept adapted into a scarier atmosphere is something I'm really excited to see. I just hope that RE4 doesn't use the big enemy that chases you around gimmick. I'm sure it's going to be scary, but literally all of the new games have done that, to the point where it's becoming a cliche. But the prospect of RE4 going in a more horror-focused direction does make you wonder about faithfulness to the original, if that's what you seek in a remake. RE4 has another strength in that the original game is one of the most accessible games to ever exist, having been released on, or at least playable on almost every major platform from this century. You'll be able to play the original RE4 on your PS5 right alongside the new one. Hell, the fans have worked hard for years and years to bring us the amazing RE4 HD project for the PC release, which overhauled the lackluster remaster as something much more visually appealing. I bring this up because that was one complaint I heard about the remakes of RE2 and 3, which had removed content from the original games or rebuilt levels from scratch. The PS1 versions of RE2 and 3 aren't very accessible to new audiences today, so to have a remake touting itself as a definitive version that doesn't have everything from the original is a slap in the face to the fans who do want to see that shot-for-shot remake with gameplay improvements, which is what RE1 had gotten when it was remade on GameCube. Which is probably why I don't see people complain that the original RE1 isn't on modern platforms and Remake 1 is. It's just so definitive that the original is obsolete. RE4 should feel free to take it in a new direction because of the fact that the old one is available everywhere. Now, maybe it won't be ported as often in the future with this new version competing with it, but from a design perspective, I think it's fair for this remake to do whatever it wants. Now again, why remake RE4 if all that is the case? Well, we all know why. That's because Capcom thinks remaking RE4 will make them a lot of money like it did when they remade RE2. RE4 is a big name and will probably sell gangbusters. That's pretty much the fact that it runs beneath all entertainment. It's made for money. Since there really isn't anything any of us can do to change that fact, that's why I'm pretty much just along for the ride and I'm going to look at the bright side. The game will probably be great, and that's all that really matters to me. It's just a shame that a game like Resident Evil Code Veronica, the game that came out after RE3, is seemingly getting left behind. Capcom must have thought RE4 was where the big bucks were at and just skipped Code Veronica. The discourse around a game deserving a remake in the case of RE4 is usually centered on Code Veronica, since many people feel like that game could really use a second chance. And I agree wholeheartedly. Its story needs a massive rewrite, its design would definitely benefit from an overhaul and make it less tedious to play. I'm right there with everyone in thinking a CV remake would be a more worthwhile product than one on RE4. But like I said, Capcom's gonna do what they're gonna do, and if the end result is a well-executed great game, I am not gonna be let down. I'd love to see both games remade if it means more fantastic Resident Evil action with these iconic characters, which is why I'm excited for the Code Veronica fan remake, which is apparently getting its first release this year, so I'll link that below for all parties interested. But if we are getting philosophical about the nature of what games deserve to be remade, I must point out that my comments section has really gone to show that many people love Code Veronica and have been pretty rude to me for not liking it. This is a mid-edit update, but I was going back through the records to find those negative comments, and there were a lot of people arguing in extreme good faith over Code Veronica. So if you're one of those people who likes the game and wrote a nice comment, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about those other goobers. Their temperament aside, if a lot of people think that this game is perfect as is, what's the difference between that and RE4, a game a lot more people happen to think is perfect as is? That's an entirely subjective point of view, with both games being showered with praise upon release. So using deserve as a standard for what games we want to reimagine is a slippery slope in my opinion. My stance is just, assuming this phenomenal series will keep producing those results, then I'm just going to look forward to seeing what the team does next. Again, you don't have to feel this way. Like I have said, there are legit reasons to think RE4 Make is a project not worth doing, I'm just looking forward to it anyway. The Last of Us from 2013 is a much different story in that at least RE4 is a game that you could think of the benefits that a remake could offer. The game's controls are great in my opinion, but do take some getting used to if you're familiar with more modern games, which RE4 predated. A remake will have a control scheme many new players will have an easier time getting into. The original Last of Us was only released 9 years ago now and plays exactly like every other modern TPS game. That was my biggest thought when this project got leaked, and it still was after seeing it announced. However, I realized it's a hypocritical position given all that I had thought regarding RE4, so I decided to think about it some more. Technically, Resident Evil was remade just 6 years after its original release. Metal Gear Solid, another PlayStation classic, was remade just 5 years after its original release. But that's the thing. The number of years isn't the important thing, it's about the evolving standards of gaming. In the 6 years between RE1 and Remake, things were completely different. Just look at the footage on the screen. The 6th gen consoles were just so much more capable than the 5th gen tech that you could completely modernize relatively recent games and make them feel brand new. It's almost double the time between the original Last of Us and the remake, The Last of Us Part 1, compared to MGS and its remake, The Twin Snakes. But in the last 9 years, third-person shooter gameplay has changed very little. By the mid-2000s, many of the tropes that are staples of games today were solidified, to the point where you could take a game like Uncharted 1 from 2007, slap a modern texture pack on it, fine-tune the gameplay, and you'd think it was a contemporary game. Or better yet, if you just gave The Last of Us Remastered, the 2014 PS4 release, a PS5 ray tracing update, it would still feel like a contemporary game. This is why people generally seem more iffy regarding remakes from the 21st century than games from before 2000. These games largely still hold up, so releasing them with HD textures does the job just fine. Which, as established before, is an argument I get. So how do I reconcile the fact that RE4 Remake is a game I'm losing my mind over, and The Last of Us Part 1 has me questioning what the point is when you could do that for both? Well, I've reached this conclusion. I'm sure these projects exist because the people who make the decisions think it's more profitable to remake games people already love than ones that are a little more iffy or lesser known. It's also easier than coming up with a game from scratch if you already have a template to work from. Be that as it may, my final stance is this. If I feel a game is going to be good, I'm gonna pick it up and try it. I guess no game really needs to justify its own existence to me in that philosophical manner. The MGS remake, for example, existed as a way to get Metal Gear on GameCube as an exclusive without having to make PS2 players jump ship to the GameCube for MGS 3. So that's a case where there is a reason to remake it, but one that doesn't have anything to do with the original game needing it. Which is why I'm going to just say that no game has a reason to exist, so I'm just going to play what's good. Do I think The Last of Us needs to be remade? Not really, but if the talented people at Naughty Dog are going to give us a version of this game with new mechanics from The Last of Us Part 2 integrated into the first game's story, I'm down. They want to reanimate the cutscenes to closer match the mocap performances? I'm down. They also said they want to incorporate the accessibility options from The Last of Us 2 into the first game, which is great. Through this, I'm getting a version of The Last of Us 1 on my PC, which I'm definitely down for, since that's where I play games the most. Maybe legitimate improvements we never thought of before could come of this, such as those sequences where Ellie needs to stand on wooden platforms to go over water could be cut down or removed entirely like they were in the sequel. Maybe the new cutscenes will elicit more emotion out of me than the original. Doubt it, but it's possible. I have a lot of emotional attachment to the original, so I am doubting it, but it is certainly within the realm of possibility. The $70 price tag is generally something I feel pretty mixed about in modern gaming. Seriously, we're reaching the point where games almost cost $100 at launch, really gatekeeping who can play games at release. But on an optimistic note, maybe the $70 price tag shows they have a lot in store for this game. When it was announced we were getting Uncharted 4 and The Lost Legacy as a collection on the PS5 and not just a free PS5 patch like other games got, such as Ratchet & Clank or Naughty Dog's own Last of Us Part 2, I was concerned they were trying to sell us Uncharted 4 again at full PS5 price, but they didn't. So maybe that's something to look forward to. The toxic crunch culture at Naughty Dog that got exposed when The Last of Us 2 released is not acceptable. I really hope they've improved that, which is definitely possible given the fact that Insomniac managed it with Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart last year, a studio that used to be plagued by terrible crunch back in the 2000s. But my overall point is just that if they want to give this game a facelift, I'm just going to go into it with an open mind, since I'm sure it will be a quality product. But with these two projects that are both remakes being announced at the same time, it really begs the question, what even is a remake anyway? When I brought up this question a few minutes ago, I said that it really seems like it should be simple, but it gets more complicated the more you think about it. Resident Evil 4 and The Last of Us are both getting remade, but for The Last of Us, it looks like a straight-up shot-for-shot remake with new models, textures, and gameplay, but RE4 is, like RE2 and 3 before it, having its basic concept taken and adapted into an entirely new game. In video game discourse, the line between a port, a remaster, a remake, and a reimagining, the word they tend to use for games that aren't fully faithful like Ratchet & Clank 2016 or RE2 make, not that those two are the same quality, but as I was saying, where the line between those four words is pretty blurry. For example, it's pretty clear that Code Veronica X on PS2 and GameCube is an enhanced port of the game on the Dreamcast, but Code Veronica X on the PS3 and 360 is a remaster of that game, overhauling the textures and lighting and making it widescreen. The Last of Us Remastered on PS4 is exactly what the title says. It took the PS3 game and enhanced its visuals and frame rate for PS4. That's a remaster. But I have heard people describe Crash Bandicoot The Insane Trilogy as a remaster and a remake. It is a game where the original Crash trilogy on PS1 was redone from scratch on PS4. What it does is take the existing games and overhaul their visual presentation. So yeah, remake or remaster. I lean with the former, but as I said, the line is blurry. Especially when some video game remakes try to be shot for shot like Mega Man Maverick Hunter X, and others are merely based on the original concept. So I figured I'd mention that remake, remaster, reimagining debate in this video as well. The ultimate Jay's Reviews ramble. Having said that, I don't really have much else to add in this subject, so I'm going to leave it at that, and pick up both games when they come out. I can't cover The Last of Us Part 1 when it drops because my content schedule is pretty much locked in for the rest of the year, but I was already wanting to do Uncharted videos next year, so I can definitely cover this then. I'm going to cover the original RE4 later this year, and we'll do the remake when it comes out in March, so do look forward to that. Otherwise, my review of Mega Man X Dive is dropping this week, and the X Armors ranking will drop next week. So in the meantime, thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you next time.